The dusty platform of the Carsonville train station buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances, a sea of weathered faces lit by the flickering glow of oil lamps. Men in worn boots and sweat-stained hats crowded close, their murmurs a low hum, like bees before a storm. At the edge of the platform stood Elias Kane, a rancher with calloused hands and a heart heavy as the iron rails stretching into the night. He didn't want to be here, not at this auction, not among men bartering for lives like cattle. But loneliness had clawed at him too long, and the promise of a companion, any companion, had pulled him to this wretched place. In the center of the crowd, a woman stood, a coarse sack over her head, her hands bound loosely with rope. Elias's stomach churned. What kind of world sold a soul like this? And yet, here he was, watching, waiting, hoping for something he couldn't name. Elias Kane was no stranger to solitude. At 42, he'd spent half his life wrestling the stubborn earth of his Wyoming ranch, a sprawling stretch of sagebrush and dreams that never quite took root. His days were filled with the lowing of cattle, the creak of his weathered porch, and the endless whistle of wine through the pines. But the nights, God, the nights were cruel. They stretched on, silent and empty, save for the ache in his chest that no amount of whiskey could drown. His wife, Clara, had been gone 10 years, taken by fever, leaving him with nothing but a locket he still carried and a daughter, Lila, who'd fled to the city at 17, chasing a life brighter than the one he could give. The letters from Lila stopped coming 2 years ago, and Elias hadn't the heart to chase her down. He was alone, save for the ghosts of what might have been. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the air, sharp as a whip. Lot number 3, gentlemen. A fine woman, strong, able to work, cook, keep a home. The crowd jeered, some laughing, others muttering prices like they were bidding on a plow. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd heard of these auctions, desperate women, often runaways or debtors, sold to men in the frontier where wives were scarce. He'd never thought he'd stoop so low, but the ranch was too big for one man, and his heart was too heavy to carry alone. He'd come with a pocketful of savings, not knowing if he'd have the guts to bid. The sack over the woman's head made it worse, dehumanizing, like she was less than livestock. Yet something in the way she stood, shoulders squared despite the ropes, made him pause. She wasn't broken. Not yet. $50, a voice called from the crowd. Elias's eyes flicked to a burly man with a cruel smirk, the kind who'd break a horse or a woman without a second thought. Another bid came, then another, the price climbing to 70, 80. Elias's hand twitched at his side. He didn't know her, didn't even know her face, but the thought of her going to that man, or any of these men, twisted something deep inside him. 100, he said, his voice rough but steady. The crowd hushed, heads turning. The auctioneer grinned, sensing a fight. 110, the burly man shot back. Elias's heart pounded. He had 200 saved, every cent he'd scraped from years of toil. 150, he said, stepping forward. The burly man cursed, spat, and waved a hand, backing off. The gavel slammed. Sold to the man in the gray coat. Elias's knees nearly buckled as he pushed through the crowd. The woman was led to him, the sack still over her head, her breathing uneven but controlled. Up close, he saw the frayed hem of her dress, the dirt smudged on her hands. She was real, not some shadow of his guilt. The auctioneer handed him the rope tied to her wrists, and Elias's fingers fumbled as he untied it. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he muttered, low enough for only her to hear. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her hands trembled as the rope fell away. He hesitated, then reached for the sack, his heart thudding. What if she was scarred, sickly, or worse, what if her eyes held hate? His fingers brushed the coarse fabric, and he pulled it free. Her face was pale, framed by dark hair matted with sweat. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that burned like embers, not with fear but with defiance. A bruise bloomed on her jaw, and her lip was split, but there was a fire in her that made Elias's breath catch. "What's your name?" he asked, softer than he meant to. Her gaze locked on his, searching, as if weighing whether he was worth answering. "Hannah," she said, her voice low but clear, like a bell cutting through fog. The sound hit Elias like a thunderclap. Hannah. The name Clara had whispered years ago, dreaming of a second child they'd never have. His throat tightened, and before he knew what he was doing, he said, "I'm Elias."
Will you marry me?
The crowd around them snickered, but Hannah didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed, studying him, and for a moment, he thought she'd laugh or run.
Instead, she nodded, just once, and said, "If it gets me out of here, yes."
The words weren't romantic, but they were honest, and that was enough for Elias. He didn't know her story, didn't know why she'd ended up on that platform, but in that moment, he vowed she'd never be bound again. They married the next day in a clapboard chapel, the preacher half-drunk and the vows stilted.
Elias didn't care.
Hannah's I do was steady, and when he slipped a plain band onto her finger, her hand didn't shake. Life on the ranch was hard, and Hannah was no stranger to it. She rose before dawn, hauling water, mending fences, and cooking meals that filled the house with warmth Elias hadn't known in years. But she was guarded, her words few, her eyes always watching. At night, she slept on a cot in the spare room, refusing the bed they were meant to share.
Elias didn't push.
He saw the scars on her wrists, the way she flinched at sudden noises, and he knew she carried a past as heavy as his own. He wanted to ask about the auction, about the bruises, about the life that had led her there, but he feared breaking the fragile trust between them. Instead, he gave her space, hoping time would soften the wall she'd built. Weeks turned to months, and the ranch began to change. Hannah planted wildflowers by the porch, their colors bright against the gray Wyoming dust. She laughed once, sharp and surprised, when a calf nuzzled her hand, and Elias felt his heart stutter. But the challenges came, as they always did. A drought scorched the land, shrinking the creek to a trickle and threatening the herd. Elias worked himself to exhaustion, and Hannah matched him, her hands blistered but unyielding. One night, as they sat by a dying fire, she spoke unprompted. "I was running," she said, staring into the flames. "From a man who thought he owned me. He caught me, sold me to pay his debts." Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched.
"I thought the auction was the end. Then you said my name like it meant something."
Elias's chest ached. He wanted to tell her about Clara, about the locket, about the daughter he'd lost to the city, but the words stuck. Instead, he reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away.
She didn't.
That night, she moved her cot closer to his room, and Elias felt hope flicker, fragile but alive. The drought broke a month later, rain soaking the parched earth, and with it came a letter. It was from Lila, his daughter, her handwriting shaky but real. She was in Denver, struggling, asking to come home. Elias's hands trembled as he read it aloud to Hannah, who listened quietly, then said, "She's your family. Bring her back."
Lila's return was a storm of its own.
At 19, she was sharp-tongued and city-worn, her eyes carrying the weight of bad choices. She bristled at Hannah, calling her the bought woman in a fit of anger. Hannah didn't flinch, but Elias saw the hurt in her eyes. He confronted Lila, his voice low but firm. "She's my wife, and she's your family now.
You don't know what she's carried."
Lila stormed off, but Hannah stayed, her quiet strength holding the house together. Over time, Lila softened, watching Hannah work, seeing the way she cared for Elias, for the ranch, for her. One evening, Lila found Hannah tending the wildflowers and muttered, "I'm sorry."
Hannah just nodded, handing her a trowel.
They planted together in silence, and Elias, watching from the porch, felt the ache in his chest ease.
The ranch thrived, but more than that, it became a home.
Hannah and Elias never spoke grand words of love, but they built it in small ways, a hand on a shoulder, a shared glance over coffee, the way she hummed Clara's old songs without knowing why. Lila found her place, too, learning the land and laughing more than she had in years. One spring day, as wildflowers bloomed brighter than ever, Hannah took Elias's hand and said, "I'd marry you again, you know. Not for escape, but for this." She gestured to the ranch, to Lila laughing with a calf, to the life they'd carved from dust and pain.
Elias's eyes stung.
He pulled the locket from his pocket, opened it to show Clara's picture, and told Hannah everything, his grief, his failures, his hope. She listened, then kissed him, soft and sure, the first time she'd ever done so. As the sun set over the Wyoming hills, Elias stood on the porch, Hannah at his side, Lila nearby. The platform at Carsonville seemed a lifetime away, its shadows burned off by the light of what they'd built. To you, watching this story unfold, know this: loneliness can break a heart, but courage can mend it. Elias bought a stranger at an auction, but it was Hannah's name, her fire, her choice, that made them whole. And in choosing each other, they found not just a marriage, but a family, a home, and a reason to keep going. So take heart, wherever you are, whatever you've lost, there's a name, a moment, a chance waiting to pull you back to life.